Prepare yourself for a journey into the unknown. The Haunter's Tale Podcast, where every whisper, every shadow is a doorway to fear.
And here we have one of my very favorite people, a legend in the haunt industry. Please welcome to Haunter's Tale, our very special guest, Leonard Pickel. Leonard, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. You and I have gone back 30 some odd years, but before that, you were even, creating very spooky experiences. I mean, in 2025, let me take you back to the very beginning. What made you want to get into the haunt business?
I did my first haunted house in 1976 in a college dormitory where I was studying to be an architect. Never thinking that I would make the turns that I did to become, to go down the path of entertainment, much less, attraction, entertainment, and architecture. And some people would say that I don't really use my degree, but they in architecture school they teach you how to design a space so that it feels comfortable to people, and all I do is break all those rules so to make it feel uncomfortable. But I was a lowly freshman at Texas A&M University, and fresh out of high school, and at the time Texas A&M had just opened up the enrollment to people that weren't in the Corps of Cadets. So a couple of years before that, I would have had to have been a cadet, and even more recently, they had opened it up to women. So there were like 4 guys to every 1 female on the campus, and as the lowly freshman in an unair conditioned dorm, we couldn't buy a date. But they did do a Halloween event. The dormitories at Texas A&M at the time kind of worked like frats did. So we had competitions and did different things. And at one point, for when Halloween rolled around, they had set hours where the guys could go over the girls' dorms and trick or treat. Then after that, the girls could come over the guys' dorms and trick or treat. And so my roommate and I were really excited about being able to go over to the girls' dorms because we hadn't seen a girl in a week. So, much less talk to one. But so he would costumed up as Groucho Marx, and I found a 2x2 and beat the end of it, blunt, and nailed that to a belt on a white shirt with ketchup on it, and had a cape that my mother had made me way back. And so Dracula and Groucho Marx went over to the girls' dorms and trick or treated for a while. And some of the girls brought us into their rooms and gave us punch and candy and all kinds of stuff. And so when that time period was over, we went running back over to our room, so to set up something so we could scare the girls. And we laid Dracula out on the table, with the bowl of candy. Groucho Marx had a bowl of candy that we just collected from the girls. Turned the lights down low, put a red bulb over the sink, and lit a candle, I think, and so we were ready. Not realizing that the girls went over to the senior dorms, at least the air-conditioned dorms, first. And but eventually we heard knock knock, trick or treat, giggle giggle down the hallway, and we knew how many doors there were, so we knew exactly when they were coming. And all I remember from that is I saw 3 girls stick their heads in. The door was wide open, so we saw 3 girls stick their heads in, look, Groucho Marx holding the bowl, and Dracula on the table. The 4th girl walked straight in, screamed. Her friends screamed. They all screamed, ran down the hallway, and we never saw them again. So in my roommate and I looked at each other and said, "Damn, if they're that easy to scare, we got to do a haunted house." I had only been to 2, in high school. One of
Right,
them.
so there were haunted houses before, like you'd experienced haunted houses.
Oh yeah, I had seen 2, but both when I was in college, and one of them was a JC's things that it would have never been allowed to be open. Now it was in our actual residence. They had taken a curtain and rented up the staircase so that there was an upside to the staircase and a downside to the staircase. So there was only one means of egress from the second floor, which means it's totally illegal to do today. But and it really wasn't very impressive. The only thing I really remember from it was walking through the bathroom and looking at a tub full of mannequin parts with blood splattered on them. It's just like it wasn't scary at all.
Mhm.
So I wasn't very impressed. But later, there was a haunted house that was really kind of down the street from my house almost, and it was actually very cutting edge even for what we do today. It was a I would consider it a pitch black style haunted house where they send you into this hallway and you have to feel your way to find where you're going.
Mhm.
And as you're feeling your way through, suddenly a strobe light would come on to one side, and people would set up in a coffin, or they'd rush the cage bar. All the action happened in this strobe light, and then the strobe light went back off. And then you're back in pitch black. And I had gone with 3 or 4 friends of mine that were all girls, so I'm having to pick these girls up off the floor every time every time the strobe lights went off. And I really remember it being very effective. At one point, the walls split, so you have to decide which one to follow. And I decided to follow this one, and I'm feeling it over, and then I feel a handrail hit me in the hip. And it's
Uh-huh.
like, oh crap, I'm on the wrong side. So I had to go back and get the other wall. And at some point in there, I remember hearing somebody whisper, watch out for snakes. And then somebody grabbed my ankle. And I don't think I touched the floor again until I was in the parking lot. I was just gone. That brought back all the memories of me, racing the light from the switch to the bed, and always
Yeah.
jumping those last few feet to make sure that whatever was under the bed couldn't grab your leg. Nothing could hang off the bed when you're sleeping, as a child, and brought back all of that stuff. So, even for today, that would be a fairly cutting edge style of haunted
Yeah.
house. And it had to be pre 1975. So how did we think the haunted house industry started? It started somewhere around in the 1970s.
Hmm.
I've looked at that pretty thoroughly, and there was a guy named George Mahana that was doing amusement park, carnival, dark ride or haunted houses up and
Yeah.
down the East Coast. And we think somewhere 1970-ish, the Philadelphia JCs contacted him and asked him to do a haunted house for them.
Oh, okay.
And the JCs, because they're a leadership organization, when you decide you want to do a fundraiser, you give them you basically do a proposal, which would be kind of a business plan. You present it to the council or whatever, they approve it or disapprove it, and then you take notes, as you're doing the thing, to what you would do differently. And then at the end of it, you also have to write some kind of a final report, and that all that stuff goes directly to the national office. So we're not sure that the St. Louis JCs are also kind of making claim that they did the first one, but one of those two groups did a haunted house, and it was very successful. And then
Right.
because they sent this thing to the national office, now the national office had a blueprint, and sent them to every JC's in the country. So we went from having one or two haunted houses in the United States to having hundreds,
Right.
because the national office had sent out this really just business plan,
Right.
how
So
to document to the rest of the country.
let's go back. So obviously you were interested in going to haunted houses at a young age. Like, so, I mean, you just mentioned how you would rush from the door switch, the light switch to the bed. So what is it about horror? I mean, have you always loved things that go bump in the night? Is it something that's always interested you and that just kind of guided you to, hey, I really like being able to use my talents to create these experiences?
I think it was probably a trip to Disneyland and seeing the Haunted Mansion that
Hmm.
really, because I don't recall really being a horror fan. I don't. I still, even today, I don't rush out and see the first horror movie that the newest horror movie that pops out. So I don't. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how all that folded. I think it was more of a creative outlay for me than it was really coming from it from horror as much as it was coming from it from architecture. As a child, I remember, designing my bachelor pad, house on graph paper, and all they always had secret passageways. And I was a huge Munsters and Addams Family fan. And then when I was pretty young, my parents drove me to, we drove all the way out in a station wagon with wood paneling on the sides in the back seat that faced the wrong direction. It's a miracle that I survived. But and went to Disney, and I was so, and of course at that time it was an e-ticket, and you only had a couple of e-tickets in the book
Right.
that you bought. So I only got to ride it a couple of times, but was totally blown away and thrilled with the concept of, there being ghosts, some kind of illusions, and the architecture. I mean, it was my background. Although I didn't really plan for it to be that way, looking back on it, the architecture side of, my left brain, whatever, was truly enforced the whole time. Even my first drafting class, which was with a pencil, in high school, we were supposed to draw a floor plan of a house, which I did. And then they wanted us to do an elevations, which I made mine, a Victorian mansion on when we did the elevations. And then we had to do a perspective, had to construct a perspective from the drawings. And I, it was the last thing that we were doing that semester. And I had drawn one, but I didn't like the angle that I had taken, and the view that I had taken, the tower was on the wrong side. So I scrapped that, to the dismay of the teacher, who was saying, "Man, you don't have time to do this again." But I'd already done it once, so I learned how to do it, and I was able to flip it and do a different angle and draw up the perspective of what was basically. And I put a spooky tree beside it. I've got that someplace. It's around here somewhere.
Oh, wow. So, personal question. Which do you prefer, 1313 Mockingbird Lane or the Addams Family? Which house do you like best?
Architecturally, the Addams Family. I mean, sorry, the Munsters.
Yeah.
And in fact, I stole that. If you look back at some of the facades that we were selling back in the day, it's a an homage, at least, if not a direct, downright copy of the 1313 Mockingbird Lane. Yeah, I like the Addams Family house, but it wasn't a real house.
Right.
And it's not. I don't think it's as architecturally cool as the Munsters house was. So yeah, definitely. And I think probably, I like both, but I think the Munsters is probably as far as the TV shows go, I think I liked it better. Yeah,
So
that oddball thing. I was kind of an oddball. I think, I was a little different, growing up through school. So I think that, that oddball and, kind of approach was, kind of said something to me. I guess Addams Family is that way too, but
yeah.
But they were rich. I certainly wasn't rich growing up.
Yeah. Sure.
Their names are legendary. Their creations have haunted your nightmares. And they all have one thing in common. They love monsters.
Available on Amazon Prime and Roku.
So now you're in college, you've done kind of your first haunted experience room. So then from that, did it become something that you wanted to do every year as a
Yeah, we built, my roommate and I got together and we built a haunted house the following October inside the dormitory, and literally begged, borrowed, and stole, masks and props and jam boxes. It was so long ago they weren't even called jam boxes, and that's what they were. So we had different music in each room, which I immediately realized was a mistake, because it all just turned to mud. But I did a haunted house every year that I was there until I graduated. And then once I graduated, I was thinking, a haunted house would be fun to do for profit someday. So what I did was I volunteered with the March of Dimes in Dallas, which was the big haunted house at the time. Almost all haunted houses at that point were all nonprofit. And so I volunteered with the March of Dimes, and was able to, and it's interesting because the first time I called them, they said, "Oh, we're already built, but we need some security if you'd like to come be a security guard. It's like, no, call me next year when you get ready to design this thing. And then the following year came, and I was kind of thinking they should have called me by now. So I called them. They said, "Oh yeah, we're under construction. We're having a meeting tonight. Come join us." So I've come to find out they had this attic, roof scene with a gargoyle on it that they wanted to build. And they had no idea how to build it when they found out I was a architectural um, uh, student,
Graduate. Yeah.
that apprentice that they wanted me to come out so they could build this room. And we sat down, and they had hired some theatrical company to do the room designs that year. And so so they sat down and we went through all the room designs, came to the one that they wanted me to build. They said, "Can you build this?" I said, "Sure." And they said, "Okay." And so everybody's all excited and got finished talking about different room designs, and we're getting up, and everybody's putting their coats on, and one of the staff people, said, "Leonard, you haven't really said much about the the meeting of what do you think about the rooms?" And I said, "I think they're all backwards." And they said, "What?" It's just like, well, in every case, the people are walking into the room, and the actor is scaring them, right in the face. You're going to bottleneck yourself all the way up to the parking lot. And I don't know why, looking back on that, other than the Haunted Mansion ride, which never stops, I don't know of any reason why I would have come up with that concept, because I hadn't really, never designed on it. And I guess we did. I guess the ones that I did in college, maybe that was where I came up with the idea that you don't want to scare the first person, you want to scare the middle or the back, because that's where the chickens are.
Yeah. Oh,
And
that's
so we
great.
sat down and redesigned that haunt, and they did 20,000 people through that event, which was the most they'd ever done
Oh my gosh.
through a haunted house.
And
And
then
so they
late 70s, right? This is
asked me
probably
to
late
chair.
70s.
That would have been
Oh
82,
wow.
82.
82. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, so then they asked me to chair the event, and I chaired not only chaired the March of Dimes event for the next 3 or 4 years, but I also designed haunted houses for Fort Worth and for the Fort Worth JCs, or Fort Worth March of Dimes, and the Plano March of Dimes. Anybody that needed a haunted house design, I would design it for them.
So you've been working once a year on these designs, right? You pretty much like we're doing this for Halloween. When did it become like, okay, I'm going to, other than an established kind of event, when did you start designing like your own haunts? When did that happen?
Yeah, after being a chairman for 4 years, I guess I had decided I had kind of replaced myself. I had a steering committee that was in place that could take over for me. And so I decided I was going to do my first haunted house, and I built my first haunted house out of credit cards and pocket change, and was able to scrape by and get open. We ran it for October, and then when everything was said and done, I was about $20,000 in debt.
Hmm.
Which I thought was obviously a huge failure, because a haunted house is a get rich quick scheme, right? So the not realizing that a haunted house is a business just like any other, and it's a 3 to 5 year payout. If people could jump in the haunted house business and make profit their first year, there'd be a whole lot more haunted houses than there are today. So it took me a while to understand that, and of course I I had now started a business, so I decided, which I never took a class on business at all in college, which was just stupid. But so I decided I needed to go and learn how to do that. So there was a class at the community college on how to start a business. Went in there, sat and listened to the guy at the front of the room tell me all the things that you should never do to start a business, all of which I had done. But he did say that if you're going to have a business, you should be an expert in your field. And to be an expert in your field, you write a book. So I came back and was trying to figure out how I was supposed to write a book, but I had cut sheets that I had been doing for a long time that were that I would hand off to the March of Dimes. I'd come up with a concept for the room design, come up with what kind of props, what kind of masks, what kind of costumes it needed, and I would hand that to the March of Dimes, and they would go out and try to to locate all those items for the haunt that year. So I took a stack of those room designs, and then at one point, during a March of Dimes meeting, I was rifling through all these notes. I'd taken notes on what I could do next, what didn't work, what did work, what might work, and so I just did a whole bunch of. I had a bunch of notes, and one of the March of Dimes ladies said, "Why don't you give that to me? Let me organize that and type it out for you. I said, oh, wow, that'd be great. I hand her this stack
Yeah.
of papers. And so she goes and a few weeks later, she comes back and hands me this typed out. It was before computer, so it was this typed out hand typed thing that she had organized my manifesto. And at the time, Fort Worth and Dallas both did haunted houses, and several years I had designed the Fort Worth haunted house. But they beat us in money and attendance every year. They beat us, and so they were the big rivals. That was our goal, was to beat Fort Worth. And so she brings us in and hands it to me. I said, wow, this is amazing. The title of it is The Pickel Theory of Haunted Houses. I'm thinking, wow, this is freaking amazing. And she says, and I hope you don't mind, but I sent a copy to the Fort Worth chairman as well. And it's just like, you just sent all my secrets to I was devastated. But later I found out that he wrote, "This is stupid" on the front of it and sent it back to her. So that was the last time I was ever concerned about sharing my ideas with people, because sometimes brilliance could slap you in the face and no one would know what it was.
So then, because of her kindness, you now had a template for a book.
Right. Yeah. So I put that together, and now I have a book. What am I supposed to do with it? You got to sell it, right? So I put a little ad in Fangoria, a little classified ad in Fangoria magazine. And I went to what started me off on the crazy path was I went to the library, the Dallas library, and I grabbed the Friday before Halloween. I would grab that newspaper, and they had newspapers from all over the country, at Denver, and they had all kinds of newspapers. And so I would look through them for ads or haunt listings, and I would take down the addresses. And then I would do a mailer to all those people, all those haunted houses. And slowly that grew into like a 3,000, name database that, that I had built up over the years using, just either selling books to people that had contacted me or collecting their address someplace. And then one year we had heard about this convention that was going to go on in Chicago. That was a Halloween convention. It's like, oh hell, we got to go. So we went to this convention, and we walked around, and it was how the Halloween and Party Expo people, and it was really, I mean, they were selling orange doilies. It was something I would have never even thought of having a booth at, because it was a wholesaler show. People were coming in and buying. You couldn't just buy one mask; you had to buy 12.
Right.
So it was something that didn't even really interest me in as far as being a haunted house guy. And so, but a couple of years after that, I got word that somebody was doing a seminar at that show that was going to be fun and profits in the haunted house industry. And I never even heard of the guy that was doing it. So, so I finally reached out to him and said, hey, do you need any help with this? And he said, oh no, it'll just be 10 or 15 people. We'll all sit in a room and, tell haunting stories. And I said, dude, I know 50 people that'll be there personally that I know that are going to be there. And what had happened is Transworld had contacted me, and they said, hey, I hear you have a database. I'm not even sure how they figured that out, and then so I sold Transworld for like pennies, my 3,000 person database. And, so I went to Transworld that year, and everybody I saw walking down the aisles, I recognized their names from my database. And they did this seminar, Fun and Profits in the Haunted House Industry. And that room, there were like 200 people in the room and another 200 people in the hallway trying to get in to see this thing. And the guy they had talked him in, the guy that was doing the seminar, they had talked him into doing this thing. He had no clue. And, in fact, he was describing his haunted house, and somebody raised their hand and said, how do you do stuff that delicate? How do you keep people from tearing up your sets? What you're talking about is way too delicate. And he says, well, we find that if you do something really, really nice, that the people will respect it and leave it alone. And you just heard 400 people go, oh
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So luckily Joe Jensen was there and some other people, and he stood up and took over the seminar, asking people to raise their hand if they do over this many people or over this many people. So we kind of organized that, that meeting into something that became something.
Mm-hmm.
And then the following year, Transworld asked me to put together a series of seminars. So we did all day seminars the day before the convention the following year. And of course, even that year that for that first seminar, that there were a couple of haunted house, prop makers and that had booths, and that's really where the at least the haunted house part of Transworld kicked off. That
Yeah.
following year, we had a large room full of people, and then gave seminars all day long before the show opened.
So help me out with this though. So before that, did you realize, like, I mean, you're getting this database and you're going and you're scouring the newspaper and you put your book out there and things like that. But did you know that there were other haunt communities and haunters out there? Or was this first time you saw this kind of seminar, like, wait a minute, like, and realizing that it was across the country?
Well, and I had that database, so I knew it was across the country. And one of the things that I did with that database is we started a newsletter. A friend of mine, Mark Klein in Natural Bridge, Virginia, told me his best advertiser was a newsletter that he sent out to his past clients. And so I thought, well, that'd be a great idea. So we wrote up 1990. We created this newsletter that I sent out to that 3,000 person database, and that we called it Haunted Attraction, as a play on words for an attraction to be haunting, attraction to a pull to go haunting, and that turned into Haunted Attraction magazine. Ended up being a 50 issues of a 30-page full color by the time we were done magazine. And I wasn't a very I should have taken at least grammar in college, probably, before I became an editor for a 30-page magazine, but I didn't. And there were two or three other magazines that popped up during that time period, and it was oversaturated. But a guy came up to me or called me one time and said he was thinking about starting a magazine. It's like, dude, don't. I was having trouble getting all the issues out. It's a magazine's a three-headed monster. It's content, and it's advertisers, and it's content, advertisers, and it's the third head.
You cut it off.
I did. Content. It's just like a haunted house. It's content, advertising, and subscribers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, and every time I felt like I had one of them put to bed, the other one raised its ugly head. So it took a while. So this guy calls me up. He says he wants to start a magazine. I said, don't do that. There's already 3 out there. We're all struggling. Why don't you partner with me and let's, take this to the next level? And he said, I'm not much into partners, but would you be interested in selling it? It's just like, yeah, maybe. And he made me an offer that I really couldn't refuse. We were having trouble getting the magazine out at all. Every time, and the biggest mistake I made was if the magazine didn't come out exactly on time, all the advertisers were pissed, because the window is so small that, and they would kind of schedule us to where they would put an ad in where they needed to push, to have all this stuff ready for Halloween. And so I told the guy, I says, I'll sell this to you, but whatever you do not, do your own haunted house. He was a home haunter at the time, and so I was just trying to tell him not to, make sure that he got these things out on time. That's the biggest thing. It's your biggest bonus is going to be able to start over from scratch and get these things out on time and make the exhibitors happy. And the absolute first thing he did, first off, every pickle hater and anybody that I would never have given an article to, because I didn't think that they were deserving of it, or they were just kind of shady, descended on this guy. So all of a sudden, all these haunted houses that I would have never put in the magazine were getting featured on the cover and that kind of thing. And immediately, all of a sudden, he's doing his own haunted house. And I don't think, the publication lasted for another year or two, and then he was gone, just absolutely gone. The website was left abandoned. It was just like it wasn't even working or something. And and I did the same thing with the convention. I started, for years we would tell Transworld, if you want to do a haunted house convention, these are the things you need to do. And they'd say, oh yeah, those are great ideas, but never did any of them. So finally I started HauntCon,
Yeah.
and, did all those things. And, and then Transworld, got into a mess when because the haunted house industry, descended on the Halloween and Party Expo people, and the Halloween, wholesale sellers hated the haunted house people because they had no business buying that wholesale. A haunter has no business buying a mask at wholesale. He's an end user. He buys it retail just like everybody else is. Everybody wants stuff, cheap. I understand, but we had no right being at that show, and I saw that crash coming.
Yeah.
I saw that, and because I'm a vendor, because I'm exhibiting at the show, they gave me a huge stack of invitations to send out to all my clients to bring them to the show. Well, my clients were individuals because they were
Right.
subscribers to the magazine. I didn't ask them whether they had a haunt or not. So
Right.
we're sending that thing to home haunters and actors and all kinds of people, anybody that's a subscriber. And they were crashing the party. And so I saw that coming to a head, and I thought eventually Transworld would say, okay, Leonard, we don't want the haunters. You can have them. We'll take the Halloween and Party Expo. But the
Right.
reverse happened. The Halloween people got so pissed off at Transworld that they broke away. And then Transworld, the only thing Transworld had to hold on to was the haunted house side. And that's where that's where we are today. That the
Yeah.
Halloween and Party Expo have a show in Vegas every year, and Transworld has the haunters. And and then after a while, um, you know, Transworld was able to copy our model really, and we were doing tours, so they started their legendary tour. And my wife Jeannie and I talked about it at the time, and said, Transworld is really filling this void that we felt like there was before we started doing this. We should just stop doing HauntCon.
Right.
Well, but what happened is that Transworld and I got sideways, and they banished me from their show in 2013, and I'm still banished to this day. And that made a situation where now I couldn't stop doing HauntCon. I had to keep doing it just so that I would have exposure. And now
Right.
even that's gone away. We sold HauntCon to Halloween and Party Expo,
Yeah.
thinking that they would be able to take to do, because again I'm a haunter. I'm a haunt designer. I'm not a exhibit person.
Right.
Thinking that somebody knew what they were doing, so we sold it to Halloween Party Expo, and they just ran it into the ground, just like the magazine. So, and now even HauntCon is gone now, at least currently not functioning.
I'm author Mark Muncy.
And I'm author Erica Lance.
And this is Eerie Travels.
Greetings, travelers. Join us as we travel through folklore, myths, monsters, legends, and dark history.
Now, we'll be your guide to the spooky side of reality as we discuss cryptids, paranormal, and all things preternatural.
Sometimes we find the truth is way scarier than fiction.
We're on twice a week on your favorite podcast platforms, including iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, and YouTube.
We have amazing guests from all of the areas of the strange and unusual, including witnesses, investigators, and more.
Yeah, with Erica's curiosity and ridiculous array of pop culture and true crime knowledge.
And Mark's decades of experience diving into folklore and the legends with the truth that's behind them.
So join us, travelers, as we take you to the edge of reality, and we'll see you on the other side.
Let's go to when I first met you, which was at Halloween Horror Nights in 1992, I think it was.
Yep.
And that's the first time I met you, and you were brought in to take care of this maze based on one of the greatest horror films of all time, which is Psycho. How did that happen, and what was your thought process going into that?
One of the last March of Dimes haunts that I did, Halloween fell on a Saturday,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew we were going to be slammed. And so what I did was I designed a haunted house that had what I call the reverse funnel. About 2/3 of the way through the haunted house, the pathway for the customers split into two hallways, and then we showed them two different things. There were two different endings to the haunt, and and the reason for that was to try to alleviate bottlenecks. And so my concept was to so I designed a haunted house that I thought could take a constant line with that and still give everybody a great show. And so on Halloween night, Saturday night, the lines starts building up, and I give the sign to the person that's taking tickets, so she knew that at some point she was just supposed to start taking tickets as fast as she could. And I had already instructed the actors to make sure that you have to scare forward, scare forward, scare forward. You can't stop anybody. You got to scare everybody forward, chase them out of the haunt. And, when she starts taking tickets, I'm looking at it and it's like, oh my God, that's too fast. But I went to the exit and looked at the people that were coming out, and they were laughing and having a good time. So I let it ride. And at 11 o'clock, we had done over 5,000 people. Over 4,000. We had done over 4,000 people. And at 11 o'clock, the parking lot was empty. We didn't close till 11:30, I don't think. And the parking lot was empty. We had put everybody that wanted to go through the thing. And it's possible that I did a seminar and mentioned that someplace. It's possible, but somehow Universal found out about it. And they were having, even in their early years in the 80s, they were having, or in the, I guess in the early 90s, they were having trouble with capacity. I mean, they were having trouble being able to get enough people through the haunt to stop, from people just getting pissed off. And I think at that time they were running at about 800 people an hour. And when they heard that I could do 1,000 people an hour, they just called me out of the blue. I didn't reach out to them or anything. And so we designed and built two haunted houses. One of them was going to go in a tent behind the Psycho hotel facade, in front of the Psycho house. And the other one was going to go in a small backstage built behind the buildings in the Chicago area of the park.
Right.
And so we went in, did the install, and they started building queue line out in front of the motel facade. And I was just laughing at them. I'd seen 1,000 people an hour line, and you guys are building way too much queue line. And then the next day they came back and they built more queue line. I said, you guys are crazy. You're never going to fill this. But they did. And not only that, but there was a line down the road, and they were able to run that haunt at 1,800 people an hour on a constant clip. And it had a split maze in it too. It was designed for high capacity, so it had a split maze, just like the one I had done for the March of Dimes. And when I did it for the March of Dimes, my concept was that if we had a different ending on both sides, people would go out, and we actually had a room that was designed to divide the group down the middle and send part of the group this way and the other group this way to see the last room design. And my idea being that I wanted people to go through it. We split the group and make them go through the last room and leave and talk about that in the parking lot and argue over whether what was the last room.
Right.
Come back and buy a ticket and go through again. And I don't know whether that happened, but what we did find is that we were able to push a lot of people through the haunt. So, the Universal show, the Psycho House had that split maze in it. The other one was too small. The space was just too small, and they couldn't do that. And
that was it. I think that was like at the Nazarman's facade, right? The one in Chicago, like right in that little alleyway.
It was a butcher shop inside inside that space was the theme. And of course, on opening night, you get a call. They're yelling at me because they can't push people through that other haunt. So I went over there to see what was going on, and and what happens is that the Universal is kind of split down the middle. There's two different groups that handle each side. The ones the haunts that are in the sound stages are controlled by different people that are on the other than the people that are on the other side of the park. Right. And the people on that side, the Chicago side of the property, they insist on putting those people in the hallways that are with a flashlight saying keep going. There's a competition between the two to see who can do, at least at the time, to see who can do the most people. And so their concept on how to win that competition, even though it ruins the show, was to have the guy there with the flashlight saying keep moving, keep moving, keep moving. And they didn't tell me they were going to do that. So my hallways were 3'6" wide, not even 4 feet. And now there's a guy in the hallway, and of course they yelled at me because they couldn't do the capacity on that side that they were doing with the cycle facade. And
Right.
it's like, well, yeah, there's guys standing in the way. Why? There's no way you can do those numbers like that. At least not with that design. I would have had to widen the wall. If they'd have told me about it, I would have given them designed in little cubby holes for them to stand in out of the pathway. Um, but
I've
yeah, I
always
mean,
found that that's one of the things that, my little bit of time at Universal, as designers, we would make these great things, tell the story, really, really kind of be so proud of it. And then we would go in and we understand from an operation, like it's there to make money, right? It's not there
right,
to serve our creative needs. But at the same time, it was one of those things that was never talked about. And then you would go in and you would just find these poor guys and gals with flashlights going, come on, come on. And psychologically, we're setting up guests to walk in and be scared of anything that pops out.
right,
So, they're either scared of them or they're mad at them or, and it
right.
also, any atmosphere, if you're not careful, it'll completely blow that away too. And I remember one time, we had the tactile, like the cloth that would hang down.
Right.
And um, we came in and went through the opening night or went through a night and we were like, it's all gone. It had all been cut. And what had happened is it was slowing people down too much. So operations had gone in there and cut it all down. And we're like, okay, I mean, again, it's that business versus creative, that sometimes it's like
Sure.
they just got in the room together at the first, it would be like, okay, well, we can talk about this. So luckily I was part of Psychopath or the Psycho Maze.
Right.
I remember, meeting you and just also kind of like watching what you guys did. And I was so fascinated by it. I remember also one night because they built a tent right behind the Bates
They built
Motel.
they poured a slab, they poured a concrete footing, and then put the tent on it, and then we built the haunted house on top of it.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so the concept was that they actually entered in through the lobby of of the uh, the
The
hotel.
hotel.
So
Yeah.
the first room was the lobby of the hotel and of the motel, and the person in the character in that room was Norman, as Norman. And then, of course, once I went into the haunted house, every other character in the haunt was Norman playing Mother. So
Right.
everybody else was in a dress. Some of them were tall and skinny. Some of them were short and fat. It was kind of crazy, but all the other characters were Mother, and but I'd gone through the thing several times trying to make sure that everybody was doing their 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 scares correctly and making sure nothing was broken right on opening weekend. And I kept going by this guy that was playing Norman in the first room, and it's just like he kept saying crazy stuff to me. It's like this guy's nuts. And eventually, my wife and I leaned a ladder against the panels on the outside of that room and climbed up on the ladder and watched him work for 30 or 45 minutes, doing his spiel as Norman, and come to find out that was you.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite things ever. I mean, I love the movie Psycho, and then they filmed Psycho 4 there, but to be in the motel lobby, I would come out for see the guests, and there's the mansion right there. All of that was such a dream. So when they offered you the job, did they already have like, we want this to be a Psycho Maze, we want this to be a butcher shop? Was all
Yeah,
of that like? The concept was there, but then what do we do inside? Like, how much of the development did
yeah,
you get to be a part of?
yeah. No, they didn't really give me much direction other than the themes of the two.
Yeah.
So yeah, we just kind of ran with it. I was obviously a Psycho fan, and so so coming up with really just the rooms of the house, a kitchen. I'm sure I've got that floor plan someplace. I'd have to go look it up, but it, just having the some of my typical room designs, the really good scares that I had been doing for a while, we upgraded and put them in that show there. I think there was one place where mother was coming out of the cabinets in the kitchen and
Mhm.
all kinds of crazy stuff. But yeah, they didn't really, and there, I don't know whether, I mean, we never sent anything in for approval from, any kind of, IP, you know, ownership. So I'm assuming Universal owns that. So it's not, wasn't an issue, but, so yeah, it was pretty easy for us to do. And, it was kind of really long before the IP, things took over. And, now they're a major part of driving ticket sales to Universal. At that time, almost everything was custom as far as I know.
Right. So then after Universal, what comes next? Then you're out there and you're just
You
client
know,
after
we
client, right?
Yeah, we were at the time we were both designing and building haunted houses, and so we would send them out in a semi, as a complete kit, and then show up on site, drop open the doors, pull all the stuff out with a local crew, set the thing up, show the client how to operate it, how to take it, how to put it together, and then it was up to them to take it down and take it with them, But we just weren't making any money. So the and we had to keep increasing the price of the packages because we just weren't in a place where we were supporting ourselves, but we weren't really making any money. So we just had to keep adding, cost to the house so we could try to figure out how to, because we could have sold 3 or 4 more haunted houses had we had them built and sitting in a trailer, ready to go. Because we used to laugh at the people that would call us, in September and say, I need a haunted house for October. And it's just like, that's great for next year, but you can't do it. We couldn't do it for this year. So we kept trying to come up with, we just kept raising the money. And then, we got to the point where, I was having clients call me and say, Hulk Hogan just went through my haunted house and we scared the crap out of him. But we're just not doing any numbers. We don't have enough people coming to the haunted house to make this thing profitable. And, um, that just really kind of broke my heart. So it was, so we started selling used haunted houses for people. If somebody was having trouble, making money with it and wanted to get out, we would list them on the website. I still do that for clients. But so I came up with the concept of instead of us building these things in a warehouse in Texas and shipping them across the country, to work more like an architectural firm would do, like an architect would, and create construction drawings that I can send to the client and have them build that haunt, by the drawings locally, and then just come out for a few days to oversee the installation and make sure that the scares are working properly and the actors are doing what they're supposed to do. So we turned that into a model, and we've really been doing it, since really 19 really the 2000s. So for 25 years, give or take,
Um,
I've been doing that for people.
so are you a fan of going to other haunts? Do you love going to another haunt?
Yeah, in fact, by October, most of my haunts are up and operational. So I traverse the countryside. I probably, and for the last couple of years, I was in Kuwait in October, November, building a haunted house in Kuwait City, Kuwait. So I
Mhm.
wasn't able to do that. But this last October, I was able to, travel the countryside, and I've done individual locations, but because some of them have 3 or 4. But I probably was in the 200 range of seeing other haunted houses. And it's I don't go out looking to steal ideas, but I do go out to see, what's effective, anything new that people are doing, you know, um, and just trying to you know, keep up on what the rest of the industry is doing, as well as as experience in haunted houses. And I have to, there's very little that scares me anymore, so I have to follow a group through, find some young couples or some teenage girls that are going through, and follow them through just to see what's effective. I think I know what I think is effective, and I look for that. But you have to follow somebody through that is experiencing a haunted house different than the way I do, because I don't jump. You can startle me, you can
Mhm.
surprise me, but you won't see me jump. but I'll get an adrenaline rush if you do something I'm not expecting. But that's pretty rare anymore. I had, sometimes I have to be looking under the skirt or trying, how did they do that? And not
Yeah.
realize there's an actor standing there. It scares the crap out of me. But yeah, no, I see as many haunted houses as I can, and I have a handful of favorites that I try to see, every year, every other year or so, across the country that are, that I think are doing amazing things and very talented people, and sometimes they disappoint me, sometimes they blow me away.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing, but yeah, and I love to take, sometimes going through a haunted house and I'll see somebody do something badly, but I'll think, if you did this instead of what they did, that would be effective. And I probably have 400 or 500 room designs that I've, cultivated over 50 years of doing this. But still, some of the ones that I built, in that very first March of Dimes haunt that I designed for them, is still very effective. So there's some that I can't get away from, some that I've, that are brand new that are amazing, but scaring people is, really kind of like telling them a joke. It's all in the setup and the timing of the punchline. And you set them up with theme and storyline and music, lighting, but you got to have the startle.
Yeah.
You got to have the startle. In my opinion, when you walk into a room, if there's and a lot of haunted houses designed that way. A lot of, even some of the elite haunted houses in the country, they'll say, okay, this room is going to be incredible. It's going to be a laboratory, and there'll be Jacob's ladders and Tesla coils and a bunch of jars with, with critters in them and all this kind of stuff. And then we're going to put this actor in the middle of the room in this great costume and this great makeup, and then tell the actor, when people come in, scare them. And it's just like, how, a great actor can do that, but an average actor can't do it. You gotta, form follows function. So what is the function of a haunted house? Scaring the crap out of people. So what does that form look like? Well, there's a crash door or a drop panel, something that so that they can't see the actor. He pops out, scares them, and then disappears again almost as quickly, so that the group behind them doesn't see what happened to the group in front of them, which screws up the startle at all completely.
Right.
So
Right.
and
So
that's how I designed my haunted house to scare a 21-year-old white male, because he's the hardest person, I think, going through the haunt. He's repeating to himself, nothing's going to scare me, nothing's going to scare me,
Right.
because he's with his friends or with a date, and he can't afford to be seen screaming like a girl. So so that's my goal, is to make that guy scream.
Do you remember the first time one of your designs scared somebody and what that felt like?
Yeah, I was probably the actor at the time, so I don't remember. I have no idea what scare that would have been, but yeah, probably with the thing that we did at the that I did in college, the haunts that I did in college. I'm sure I was scaring people, and it's funny because when you jump out and scare somebody, they get an adrenaline rush, but you get an adrenaline rush too. So it's a very symbiotic relationship between the two, which is why there's so many people that act in haunted houses for free, because it's a blast.
Yeah. So what do you think in 2025? Like, what do you think of this industry? I mean, it's grown now to where, like, I mean, there's so many home haunters, there's so many professional haunters. You go to a place like Trans World or one of these, and I agree with you. At some point, like at Trans World, it's like that's not for everybody. Like home haunters, I don't know if they should be spending $15,000 on an animatronic for their home. But again, like it's this beast that's out there. But like in 2025, do you feel like I know from a financial standpoint, it seems like people want to spend money on Halloween. But as far as the designers, do you feel like we're giving the people what they want, or do you feel like we're at the precipice of this new creation, like we're getting ready to do something, we just don't know what it is?
Well, haunted houses were immersive long before immersive was cool. So, and you can go through, and anytime I go through a haunted house, I'll do everything I can to go through it twice, because it's a different show.
Yeah.
Depending upon what the people in front of you are doing, depending upon what the actors are doing, how everybody reacts to the stimulus. It can be a completely different show, especially Universal. There are times that I've gone through their haunt one time and turned around and gone through again, and some of the stuff that was working the first time didn't, and some of the stuff that I didn't even see the first time was happening. So you really have to give a haunt a couple of passes through to make sure that you even get the full experience.
Yeah.
What's the future of the haunted house industry? I don't know. We've been growing, for as long as I've been doing this. The industry has been growing like crazy, really. And every year seems to be, somewhere around a 10% increase in attendance across the board. Weather can kill you. If your baseball team is in the World Series, that can really hurt your market as far as going to haunts. There's things that can hurt you. 9/11 really hurt a bunch of haunts as far as attendance goes, but and it took us several years to get back up to where we were, but we've smashed those numbers now. So it was my dad that told me after I had lost that $20,000, I was $20,000 in debt after that first haunt that I did. It was my dad that says, you got so many people coming to you wanting you to design haunted houses for them, and why don't you do that instead of doing your own? Because doing your own is very risky. He was the pragmatist, and so I started a company doing that, and I probably would be much better off. I'd probably be much more wealthy than I am if I had done that. Had I stayed a haunter instead of just designing for other people. But I wouldn't have designed anywhere near as many haunted houses, and I wouldn't have had as much fun, I don't think.
How many haunts do you think or do you have a number, or where is it? Like
that I've designed or built in my lifetime? Oh,
yeah.
It's north of 300, I'm sure.
Oh, that's fantastic. So
Yeah.
what's next for you? I mean, anybody that wants to find you can entrepreneurs.com, which is a fantastic website. Anybody that's just getting started, I recommend they reach out to you, or established reach out to you just for, I mean, you have consulting where you can just spend an hour telling people your time. And thank you for doing this today, because I hope it drives a lot of people to use your talents. Because I mean, you really are, there's a couple people in the industry that you kind of look at and you go, they're responsible for where a lot of us are today. They did the work, they took the risk, they discovered so much, and I strongly believe that you're at the top of that list. So, is Entrepreneurs the best way to find you if somebody's just kind of wanting to get into the world, or is established in the world needs some help?
Yeah, I've kind of niched myself into helping people get started, or helping people that got started but weren't really sure what they were doing, kind of like the way I started as well. It's nice to have someone that you can call and say, I'm thinking about doing either this or this. Which one do you think I should do? And I'll always give them my 2 cents on anything that's going on. But yeah, I've kind of niched myself into helping people get started. So those are the clients. Most of the clients that I have are people that have never done a haunted house. Maybe they've been doing a home haunt, or maybe they have a building that they think is would draw as a haunted house. And so they're usually companies that will hire me to come in and do, consult for them and a consultant. I made every mistake there was to make at least twice, because I knew it wasn't a mistake the first time. So I did it again, before I realized, maybe that wasn't the right way to go. So as a consultant, I sell as much, what not to do as much as what to do. But at least I can, steer people around potholes that, and the edge of the cliff to make sure that we give them the best opportunity, to be profitable. I almost think when people call me and say they want to do a haunted house, my first job is to talk them out of it, because it's not an easy way to make a living. But if they're sold, if they've caught the disease, haunting is a disease and it is terminal, there is no cure. Then if they've got the disease, then at least let me put you on a path that gives you the best opportunity to be profitable quickly, so that you make sure that you're, not losing your house and your wife and your kids. So, because I've seen it happen.
Yeah. Well, Leonard, thank you. I appreciate your time. And
my pleasure.
Thanks for always being out there for us haunters. And it's been a blessing. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Let's do it again.
Yeah.
Take heed. I'm talking to you. And you. And you. If you dare tell anyone how this picture ends, if you dare reveal who the murderer really is, I'll climb into your bedroom window tonight and tear you limb from limb. I'll haunt you. Good night. Sleep tight.